There was a flight of about 200 Venezuelans who were deported to Venezuela, not to a prison. The Trump administration still has the ability to deport people, but their ability to do so without any checks, without any requirements of due process. And let's be clear, why do we have due process in this country? Why does anybody have due process? Due process simply means making sure that the subjects who are being charged or accused of something are in fact those people.
Right.
Due process prevents things like mistaken identity, or things like, hey, we say you did something, but you didn't. And so aside from the fact that you're sending multiple planes full of people when a judge has said you cannot do this, you're sending them to one of the worst prisons in the hemisphere. And you're doing so on grounds that nobody knows if it's even true. And we should say, we got a clip of Tom Homan here. He oversees an agency. And if you believe that there is a fish rots from the head down, there is no reason to believe that we're dealing with a huge amount of competence when it comes to ICE agents. A lot of these people are would-be cops, but couldn't make it through the police academies, or they washed out, or whatever it is.
I mean, that guy in that Marvel t-shirt that was arresting Mahmoud Khalil didn't really look like he was, the highest level law enforcement officer in the country. I mean, it looked like a guy that just had strolled off the street and just was really eager to be a fascist bootlicker.
That's goons.
And here is Tom Homan on This Week. And I don't know, if you have even the most rudimentary understanding of non-authoritarian government structures, democracies, any places that provides any type of due process. Again, due process can be many different things, but what it's supposed to do is that it's supposed to provide a requisite amount of processing to make sure that the decision you're making is justified on the premise that you're making that decision. Let's see if you can see what's problematic with Tom Homan's response in this exchange on ABC's This Week.
140 terrorists from the United States.
So how do you determine, or how do your people in the field determine that somebody is a gang member?
Look, there's various methods. I've noticed in the media, a lot of them don't have criminal histories. Well, a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories.
Okay, pause it for a second.
Like
Let me just translate, because I think this guy's from Massachusetts. What are you saying? Well, I don't know. Was everything?
He's talking to himself.
He's talking to himself, but he's trying to go through, there is no way. They don't make these assessments. They see a tattoo and they're like, well,
I like that, the new evolution of Trump surrogates lying on TV is just gargle noises to fill the space instead of just having to do actual words. I mean, why bother, right?
Garbage disposal.
Yeah.
What he's going to launch into here, though, is not in any way. It is basically saying, I've heard the critique that none of these people have criminal records. Now, I want you to contemplate the idea that if not having a criminal record was part of the requirements to be deported, there would be a lot of people probably. So he never affirmatively says how they determine that someone's in a gang. All they say is, well, a lot of gang members don't have criminal records. This is just astonishing.
In the media, a lot of them don't have criminal histories. Well, a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories. Just like a lot of terrorists in this world, they're not in any terrorist database, right? We only know the information what's in databases based on, for instance, most terrorists we arrest that are identified by the U.S. government are later identified through a Title III investigation or through an undercover operation. They're not in any terrorist screening database. We know that. A lot of gang members, I started as a cop in 1984. Many gang members don't have a criminal history. So we have a kind of social social media. We have to count on surveillance techniques. We have to count on sworn statements from other gang members. You got to count on, wiretaps and Title IIIs. Everything involved with the criminal investigation come into play. So just because someone hasn't been arrested and charged with a crime yet, doesn't mean they're a member of a gang.
Pause it. I just want to make it clear again. He said nothing affirmatively as to how they determine that someone's in a gang. The only thing he said is not having a criminal record is not evidence that you're not in a gang. Now, you're all suspect here because, as far as I know, none of you have a criminal record. Just want to put that on.
Just because I'm not in the database doesn't mean I'm not a terrorist.
Exactly.
Hasn't been arrested and charged with a crime yet, doesn't mean they're a member of a gang.
But how do you, what we've heard from lawyers representing some of these people is that they deny that they're members of this gang, or either, Tren de Aragua or MS-13. Do they get a chance to prove that before you take them out of the country and put them in to a notorious prison in a country that they're not even from? Do they have any due process at all?
Look, due process. Where was Lake and Ronnie's due process? Where were all these young women that were killed and raped by members of TDA? Where was their due process?
Well, the people that did that should be prosecuted.
Alive on Subway, where's her due process?
Well, sure.
The bottom line is that plane was full of people designated as terrorists. Number one. Number two, every Venezuelan migrant on that flight was a TDA member based on numerous criminal investigations, on intelligence reports, and a lot of work by ICE officers. Matter of fact, 2 days after that flight took off, I even had a discussion with the acting director of ICE, and he reiterated that every Venezuelan on that plane was a known member of the TDA. So a lot of officers, a lot of criminal investigators, special agents who've done this for decades, looked at the intelligence information, the criminal investigation information, all the various social media and surveillance and government records and public records, and they're confident that they're all members of the TDA. I'm not surprised that a member of the family saying they're not a member of the TDA, but they were given due process as according to the laws on the books. See, that's the difference between the Trump administration and Biden administration. We're actually using the laws on the books to enforce immigration law and secure the border at the highest level it's ever been. The Biden administration.
All right, look. There's no reason to continue to play because John Carl does not get back to his answer. The answer to the question of did Laken Riley or anybody else, any victim of not these people, of people like these people, right? Like he's not, nobody's been, this is not those people. These are people sort of like that he claims are associated with those people. The answer, if you're in media and you found yourself interviewing a fascist like this, the answer to the retort, did Laken Riley get her due process, is no, she didn't. And that's how we can tell the difference between the bad guys and the good guys. And you are now basically saying that our standard is at the same level as a murderer's standard.
Yeah, and he's also very purposefully trying to use this brutal case and killing of Laken Riley, as does the legislation that some Democrats signed on board for. They are using that case to broadly impugn and accuse all immigrants of basically being criminals. We're seeing this degradation. It's not really a degradation, but a lot of people in the media took it at face value. They're calling them criminals, so they must be. How about the LGBTQ hairdresser that was profiled? This is just a paragraph from this great Time piece that was over the weekend about what happened when they got these migrants got to this El Salvador prison. The intake began with slaps. One young man sobbed when the guard pushed him to the floor. He said, "I'm not a gang member. I'm gay. I'm a barber." I believed him. But maybe it's only because he didn't look like what I had expected. He wasn't a tattooed monster. The men were pulled from the buses so fast the guards couldn't keep pace. Chained at their ankles and wrists, they stumbled and fell, some guards falling to the ground with them. With each fall came a kick, a slap, a shove. People should read this whole piece. Some of the detainees were stripped naked. Their men are calling out for their mother. Another example was somebody who had a tattoo of a soccer team. He's a youth soccer coach, has no criminal record. These are the people that are being accused of being gang members without evidence by Homan. And this is how lynchings happened in the United States. When you don't have due process and you have this kind of like racialized, racially motivated attacks against wide swaths of people, drawing them to this one brutal case, similarly to how Israel did it with Palestinians, by the way, you get extrajudicial killings because there is no due process. This is what they're advocating for.
That guy, they said he had a crown, and the crowns are associated with the gang tattoos. This is the tattoo he had in Real Madrid with the crown on it.
Also, it's not a crime to be in a gang.
Right.
They may have some type of attempting to do some type of special designation for these particular gangs. But the fact is, it's not a crime to be in a gang, A. And B, again, without due process, you can't say with any level of confidence, at least in the context of the way that we expect government to prove things, that they're in this gang. We don't even know. We have no mechanism even to determine that they're here without documentation. And the whole point is, and why it's a problem for even those of you who are citizens, they're just going to get bolder and bolder if they're allowed to do this. And they're just going to get sloppier and sloppier. As you know, and it was breaking today just before we started the show, Judge Bozeman, is that right? Is that his name? Boasberg. A Bush-appointed judge as to the Superior Court, I think, and then was elevated by Barack Obama. So to the extent that we know any of his politics, he's okay with the Federalist Society, or was. He has refused to lift the order enjoining Trump from using the Alien Enemies Act to deport immigrants. And that doesn't mean that there aren't immigrants being deported. It's just that they can't do it under the auspices of the Alien Enemies Act, which affords a lot less due process. And here is the fundamental problem that the Republicans and really the anti-immigrant folks have in terms of their fantastical solution. And that is to deport all immigrants. And that is that we don't have the capacity to process them. And certainly part of like the Biden immigration bill, there's a lot of it that I didn't like. But one of the things that was good was we need more money to have more magistrates to assess people's claims of asylum. I also would have liked to loosen those claims. I think having immigrants in this country is healthy for us, both from an economic standpoint and just broadly societal standpoint. But here is Brian Kilmeade unwittingly understanding the dilemma that is being faced and then basically saying like, hey, let's throw out all one of the fundamental principles of United States society.
Asking that in order to send them to El Salvador, you have to have proof that they were in a gang, or is breaking the law and entering our country that's not enough.
But the president is saying under the act that you don't have to show, you don't have to do this due process. So you have a constitutional right that is actually they are afforded to illegals in this country. We should revisit that. But then you have
hold on for a second. We should revisit the constitutional rights that the so-called illegals have in this country. I love how you throw off the Constitution. We should revisit that. Okay, let's revisit that. How do we go about revisiting that constitutional right?
I'm going to pretend I'm taking it seriously, but I'm going to, say we'll
revisit it.
Right, and that's what's incredible about this is they've blown past the pretense that we were under in the Bush administration that like, okay, well, if we're going to violate their due process rights, let's at least keep them overseas in Guantanamo Bay and not give them a trial or like just detain them indefinitely. Now, if you're on U.S. soil, but you're not a permanent U.S. citizen, apparently you don't have constitutional rights, according to Fox and Friends, which is news to a lot of legal scholars.
Let me just correct you. If you are suspected or accused of being a non-citizen, because we don't know.
Right.
Like, part of due process, the reason why you have due process is not just because it's fun to say, it's because you want to know that the people that you are subjects of your criminal, of your, your prosecutorial actions are actually of the class or have done the thing reasonably assuming that they have done. That's what due process is for. But we should revisit that. But go ahead.
Are afforded to illegals in this country. We should revisit that. But then you have a competing act that is saying, hey, if someone is a part of a foreign terrorist organization, that you don't have to give them due process and they can be deported. Now, the agents that I talked to,
they have to prove that they were actually in Nicaragua or MS-13. Or
exactly. And so what the agents are saying is, because you hear all these activists keep talking about the tattoos. We're not just talking about the tattoos. That's just one of the elements. We sat on their house, and part of the reason why we don't want to reveal some of this information is because some of the people that got the information are undercover. So if we start bringing out our sources and methods, we're going to burn our sources that are still within the organization.
That's a great point.
It's not a great point. Then conclude your investigation. What is this?
We need to have the secret moles inside the sleeper cells.
Yeah, we don't want to give away the secret.
To prevent them from wait, what? Why don't you just, I don't get it. Why wouldn't you just round them all up?
The sources and methods of one of these goons looking through like images, drinking a Mountain Dew, being like, yeah, I think that's a terrorist because I saw a crown tattoo. Please.
You don't understand what they're doing, Matt.
Eating Cheetos, being like, yeah, it looks like a terrorist.
Yeah, round him up. That's what it is.
With your law enforcement background, especially. But I also think it's not practical to think that we can do due process on 8 million people.
No.
There's 22 million people here, at minimum illegal already, just in the last 3 administrations.
Pause
and
it for a
there's some
second.
people that got.
Now, the numbers are 23 million now it's up to?
Total, I guess, is what he said.
I don't think so.
He said 8 million there, and then I mean,
Go back a little
Kilmeade
bit.
said 22 million at a minimum here illegally, which is not the number that.
But okay, let's assume it's 23
cited.
million that are here illegally. Like some have overstayed and this and that. They're claiming that if you're a member of a terrorist organization, all of a sudden this gangs have bumped up to terrorist organizations now, as opposed to criminal organizations. We can't reasonably do due process. Well, then how do you know these people are the people that you say they are?
Maybe it's time to tell.
Trust us.
Maybe it's time to tell all the Republican voters who've been gassed up about mass deportations that actually all that shit was lies for campaigns. It's not feasible.
And I was suspicious that this was the case. But you look it up, you just do the simple math. There's around 12.8 million green card holders living in the U.S. The estimates in terms of people who are here having crossed the border without documentation is around 11 million.
Oh,
So,
green card who have overstayed?
no, just green card holders. So that total the rough math would be
So
what
they're adding up legal.
That's what it seems like. Is that right? Like my math?
I don't know.
12.8 plus
my
11?
understanding is that half of the undocumented people in this country are actually came here with a visa and then overstayed. And the other half came across the border, north or south, or by boat or whatever, without documentation.
I don't know if that's the number that Kilmeade is describing, but all of the figures that I have seen in terms of people who are here and technically what they would call illegal immigrants would be anywhere from 8 to 12 million people. It's around 11 million is usually what's used right now. if you were to do that math, that would be an extremely scary escalation to add green card holders.
But even
we're
if
already seeing it. We're already seeing green card holders being deported and detained and attacked without due process.
Well, that's because they were really mean on social media.
To Israel?
To Israel. But here's some bad news. Even if it's just 8 million, you will also not be able to provide due process for them in any type of reasonable time with the resource that we dedicated towards it. And this is it's the same thing they're doing with Social Security. We break the process in delivering these things and then say these things are not things that we should have.
It's because some of the people that got the information are undercover. So if we start bringing out our sources and methods, we're going to burn our sources that are still within the organization.
That's a great point with your law enforcement background, especially. But I also think it's not practical to think that we can do due process on 8 million people.
No.
There's 22 million people here, at minimum illegal already, just in the last 3 administrations. And there's some people that got through with Trump's administration. If we're going to give these guys a day in court and a lawyer, we can't do it. They don't deserve it. Our system doesn't need to be double burdened. And I would just love to see the same curiosity, anger, outrage about the millions that came here at our border. You found the NGOs.
Yeah.
You couldn't get into the building.
So true.
But they were sent into Westchester, small towns into Pennsylvania, and they're unloaded, and we don't know anything about them. Where was Margaret Brennan and who's ever hosting Meet the Press today?
Welcome.
Where were they? Curious about what's going on. How do we know who's landing in the middle of the night? How do we know who's been put into our school systems in?
Pause it. Maybe you should have some type of due process. I mean, what do you mean? How do we know?
Expand the bureaucracy.
Right.
Were they flying in invisible jets that are run by some type of fourth party? Give the money, provide the capacity to our immigration system. If you are concerned that they don't know who these people are.
I mean, look at this image. Look at this. Just put this screenshot up. I mean, what images does this look like? It's some of the darkest periods of our history. Men with shaved heads, bowing their heads, being surrounded by highly militarized
put on display.
Forces.
This is all for display purposes.
There are around 700,000 Venezuelan migrants who were in the country prior to Trump getting into office. That's the estimate. Tren de Aragua, that's a few hundred are the estimates. But even if you wanted to include all 700,000 Venezuelan migrants who are here, the total that Brian Kilmeade is talking about vastly exceeds by almost just incomprehensible portions, the number of criminals that are here, which means that they are basically classifying all immigrants as criminals.
Right, and then saying it's not just that they're gang members, it's that they're terrorists, because you can't just say, because it's crazy how much they are aware, obviously, of the fact that if you said, these people haven't done anything wrong other than seek a better life in this country, people don't want to see them sent to a gulag.
Yeah.
That's why Sagar was sort of dismissive of it on Breaking Point, saying well, who's saying that? The ACLU? You think none? I mean, even if one of these people is that innocent, this is a crime against, it is, even if they're all guilty, to be honest, sending them to a foreign gulag by one of your fascist sort of buddies is, it's despicable.
And look at the comparison how they treat the January 6thers who were on video doing what they did versus just presuming criminality because people are Latino. MS-13 was also cited there. That started in L.A. In a 80s. In a prison. We have prison gangs all across the country. We're going to classify all of those as or as foreign terrorist organizations, even though they originate in the United States.
Tren de Aragua also started in a prison, which is just a good thing to remember for folks who think that the solution to all this stuff is locking up people in large numbers.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.